Hey guys, what's going on? This is Dr. Matt Wenning at winningstrength.com. And I have another video for you today. It seems that Dr. Mike Israetel has not learned his lesson on utilizing my videos for overspeed eccentrics or moving weights quickly. So I want to dive into some of the reasons that you may or may not want to be listening to Dr. Mike Israetel when it comes to performance. Now, if we look at his thought process on hypertrophy, I feel that he has a lot of ground to stand on when talking about lowering eccentrics slowly. But what we have to remember is that not all people utilize weight training for just hypertrophy alone. And having a mindset of utilizing only weight training for hypertrophy is a very limited way in order to utilize weights and other implements in the weight room. So training with overspeed eccentrics, as he utilized and butchered my video in the bench press, it means if you're training for performance, you can't neglect moving faster. And overspeed eccentrics have a lot of positive things that they do in the body and also in sport. There are a few things to consider, though, before we talk about benefits to moving fast with fast eccentrics. So in the talk that he goes through with this video, he is correct in stating that if you have improper form or your technique is not very good, doing things at a faster rate can increase injury. So I find that it's very important for a lot of advanced methods, not only just the overspeed eccentrics, but also a lot of different methods, even moving slower tempos, that your technique is absolutely crucial. The other thing I think is with overspeed eccentrics is you probably want to be at a slightly more advanced level than a beginner. Now, I get that Dr. Israetel probably talks to 85-90% beginners, which is why he has millions of followers versus me only having 112,000. But enough of the hatred, right? Like, people don't want to listen how to train smart, so be it. But I want to make sure that you guys understand that with overspeed eccentrics, there are some important factors involved with it. So what does moving fast with eccentric speed do? Well, it increases kinetic energy, which maximizes stretch reflex both in the muscle and passive tissue. You've seen me do a lot of videos, and if you've watched a lot of my videos, a lot of my training and thought process is more revolving, or at least partially revolving, around passive tissue resiliency and its ability to co-coordinate with all different types of movements. This means that if you are learning to maximize stretch reflex can be accountable of roughly 10 to 15% of your maximal strength. I would say even higher than that. Dr. Fred Hatfield was one of the first people to kind of expose this in the West with this compensatory acceleration, meaning he was moving moderate weights with maximal intent. Now, we can get to maximal intent a handful of ways. We can get to it by going really heavy, which is going to be slower. We can get to it by fatigue, which is what Dr. Israetel trains for, because all he seems to want to focus on is hypertrophy. But we can also get there by moving at high velocity, which overspeed eccentrics and moving quickly in an eccentric phase has some advantages too. So moving slow as a lifter, so if you're trying to be a strength athlete, and your major goal is not to necessarily just be the biggest guy in the room, which I'm here to tell you is going to be hard pressed genetics. Many people, at my biggest, my legs were 32 inches around, which was very difficult to get at 6'1". But it made me an immense lifter when I found out about going faster. So at 19 years old, I'm a world champion lifter, and I know nothing about speed work. I'm basically training the way Mike Israetel says. So I'm totaling about 2,000 pounds of powerlifting. I'm in an amateur rank, but I'm very highly ranked, obviously. And I run into Louis Simmons, and Louis Simmons starts telling me about doing speed work, which sounds completely crazy. It's like, wait a minute, you mean if I move faster, I'm going to get stronger? It didn't make any sense, but it made sense to a lot of guys in the top, i.e. Charlie Francis, i.e. Medvedev, i.e. Verkhoshansky, i.e. a lot of different researchers talking about store kinetic energy and stretch reflex. So what you find is that moving slow and potentially, directly moving slow in everything that you do is going to teach you to conserve energy and not expend it. So if your major goal is to be ultra powerful, increase vertical jump, increase your maximum level of strength in the squat, the deadlift, the bench press, the clean and jerk, and the snatch, you're going to want to do positions and portions of lifting that require high velocity. So if we look at there's a study in 2013, and the topic is 3 weeks of eccentric overspeed exercises enhances power of running speed and performance in trained athletes. So that right there should tell you that, one, this is a good study because they're using trained athletes, and two, they're using overspeed eccentrics and seeing enhancements in power and running speed. So I hope that you can understand that it's very important to do what Mike Israetel is telling you not to do. The study showed that it was important to train both force and movement velocity to enhance functional power expression when compared to traditional resistance training. So if we were going to do a traditional weightlifting workout, we would do everything, say 3 sets of 10, we would do it slow and controlled manner, and this is telling us that a higher velocity type training with resistance is showing a better outcome than doing the traditional, what I would consider Mike Israetel training cycle. Now, the ability to change direction is deemed an essential factor to sports performance. Lockheed proved this in 2013. It's been done in multiple studies, but think about being able to change direction. You're going one direction and then boom, you have to change to another. Training that is crucial. There are some studies that showing in soccer games that happens over 750 times. But we find that we're not using it very much in the weight room. I just got back from the San Diego Padres training camp. And what I can tell you from watching their speed day and maximal effort leg day, that about 35% of their loading was done with high-speed eccentrics. They were actually doing drop lunges with heavier weights in their hands and dropping as fast as they could and catching. They were doing depth jumps single-legged. They were doing acceleration drills and deacceleration drills in a linear state. And then they were also doing maximal effort lifting. And I find it interesting that almost a ton of their stuff was overspeed eccentrics. And these are professional baseball players that are making millions of dollars a year with some of the best strength coaches in the world, and they're using overspeed eccentrics. So what are we really talking about here? Well, overspeed eccentrics are eccentrics that are quicker in nature and may lead to greater motor unit recruitment. This has been actually done a long time at Westside Barbell, the real nature and power of band training. So doing band dynamic bench press, band dynamic squats, things with an eccentric phase before the concentric phase, increased the strength of world-class lifters by leaps and bounds. And a lot of it was due to the fact that the body had to store more kinetic energy with the bands than traditional weight because it was accelerating gravity. So what we have to understand is that there are actually tools that accelerate the eccentric, i.e. bands, possibly chains. We also know that it may strengthen connective tissue by forcing more energy absorption. So when you drop it and have to return it, you're actually accelerating the weight, making it heavier and making the tissue have to respond to a harder stimulus with a submaximal load, which is mostly what we talk about with the dynamic effort method. It also helps us absorb force. So sudden impact when trained correctly can reduce injury. So if we're doing depth jumps, speed squats, speed bench pressing, if somebody falls, they're probably not going to fall at a slow rate. They're not going to fall in a slow tempo. They're not going to move in a slow tempo. They're going to slam. And if you've been training that on a consistent basis, it's not going to be an over alarming phase that you actually fall, trip, or move. This sounds very important for people that are starting the aging process after 35, 40 years old. So if you just go into the gym and you're training just like a bodybuilder, you're going to have issues with staying quicker. If we look at some of the top level athletes that have ever lived, when they start to retire is when they lose that first 2 or 3 steps or less quickness. Quickness is usually the deciding factor whether somebody's pro or amateur, and overspeed eccentrics are a huge portion of that. So the next time you go listen to somebody that's ultra popular on the internet, think of the context in which they're talking. Mike Israetel is not talking to a crowd that is a performance sector crowd. He's talking to people that are amateur and rookie beginner level bodybuilders in which I totally agree that they probably need slower eccentrics to understand technique. But once that technique has been solidified, then you are limiting yourself by training the exact same way all the time. So this is Dr. Matt Wenning at winningstrength.com. If you need any more help or have any questions, please go and join Patreon, and I will post some studies that I think might be interesting for you to read. Talk to you guys soon.